So, no one in the family went to school. In fact, I am the only one in the entire family to graduate high school. No one has done so. And I'm talking aunts, uncles, nieces, and nephews. I'm the only one to do so. In fact, I'm the only one to go to college. In fact, I'm the only one who joined the military. And yet, I was the only one mistreated. I couldn't go to school. In those days, being gay was seriously a problem. I couldn't actively walk down the street because people would see that I was gay. I couldn't talk because people heard the femininity in my voice. I couldn't dress because people saw how I dressed was effeminate. I couldn't be gay. I would have been shot, especially in a neighborhood that I grew up in. Not only was my skin color a problem, but if they knew that I was gay, I would have been shot. And in fact, I was shot at. I was robbed at gunpoint. I was beaten by the back of a gun. I was pissed on. All this happened in my neighborhood because of who I am and what I identify as. But whenever I went to my mom for tell her these problems, she adamantly and refused to listen to my pleas and cries. It was, why are you even here? I'm talking to you as your son. And I remember to even get a school note, like if we were going on a trip or something, I needed her to sign a note or something. It was so much work just to get her to do. She never wanted to do anything that benefited me, and always and often dismissed me, and had to try to eliminate me in so many cases, an involvement that I'm looking and reminding about now. My mother has gotten away with so much shit. It's remarkable how she's now dead and gotten away with all of what she's done, and yet I'm still the one traumatized and going through the pain as if she was still actually here. It's she was fighting with my stepfather when I was maybe about 15, 16. She was fighting with them, and they were going back and forth, and as they always did, you know, it was, they constantly fought. And inside the projects, the walls are this thick, and you can literally scream bloody murder and scream for your life, and no one hear you. And in a really bad neighborhood, sometimes you did hear people screaming, but it was so often that people ignored it. And they ignored the fact that my mother would constantly scream and fight with my stepfather over his addiction. But I look at it now and think that he had an addiction because of her. Her actions and the way she treated him and me were very targeted for abuse. But he too had his part because he sexually molested me, and he was allowed to do this for years. He molested me over and over and over and over again. She caught us many times, and yet he's never been charged. To this day, he's never been charged with molesting me. There was one day he had me bent over, and he tried to stick it in, and it was blood everywhere, and it was just so painful. And he just kept pushing, and it hurt. There are other times he forced me to suck his cock, and he would forcibly force himself on top of me and make me his rag doll. You ever see that movie, The Color Purple, when Mista gets on top of Celie? She's just there, like, why is he on top of me and doing this? And that's how I was. And this went on for years, and my mother actually caught us. And she caught us on several occasions and did nothing. So I thought it was somewhat normal, and we continued on, and I got used to it. And the more I got used to it, I realized that it was a good form of attention, because things were happening to me, and my dick was getting bigger, and I was exploring something really exciting and enjoying it. And so every time it happened, I began to like it more and more. And she continued with trying to, knowing that side as well, she continued to get that anger of being upset that now she wasn't having the attention from her husband because it was all on me. She tried even harder to get rid of me. She had me arrested for truancy over 200 times. 200 times. Do you remember what I just told you? I am the first and only one to graduate high school in my entire family because no one else had gone to school. I am the only one. But yet you victimized me and put me in this torture of this facility of criminals. You had me arrested. I'll get into that later. But you continue to do this over and over and over again, knowing that school was even worse. You knew why I didn't want to go to school, because it was happening to your other children. Give me a fucking break. So the other kids didn't get to go to school. My other brothers and sisters didn't get to go to school, and they were fine. She didn't do anything to them. I was the only one always arrested. And I say arrested because back in the day it was truancy, and the truant officers would come and literally put you in handcuffs and send you to this detention center until school was over. And the detention center was full of criminals and thugs and people that would harass me more and more and more because I was gay. And I was beat up even more because I was gay and white. It just goes on and on. And so I had to go to school, but this time I found a way not to go to school, because I was not listening to the authorities, because they clearly weren't even hearing me as I told my story of why I didn't want to go to school. My mother wasn't listening to me on why I wanted to go to school. So I had to think of a way and make them think that I did go to school. So I would hide under the bed, and I hid under the bed almost every morning, and I didn't go to school, and I was safe. But I was safe inside this room, and this room would eventually become my home. Every part of my life had been in this room. They're now having laws made to stop solitary confinement because of the damage it can cause someone. Can you imagine being stuck inside a room being stuck inside a room. Can you imagine being stuck inside a room 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? I was that person. I still am that person. This is the person my mother shaped me to be. This is the person my mother made. This is me. I am my mother's blood, my mother's unwanted love, my mother's neglect, my mother's abuse. There's so many times that I was hit. A bone was broken and I had to say I fell down the stairs, and there was no stairs in the apartment. So how could I fall down the stairs? I was constantly bloodied and bruised, but the doctors allowed it because I was gay and bullied and beat up at school. This is my mother. You have to understand. She did so much to me. I never got anything new. Like every Easter or Christmas or my birthday or anything, I never got anything new. It was always hand-me-downs and stuff. And I remember going to school in two left sneakers and wearing rags. So when she caught her molesting me, and then she had me detained all those times for truancy, it wasn't working. So she got even angrier and wanted to get rid of me even more. Again, I was always the target of abuse. So as I grew up, she started to avoid me more and more and more and more and more, as if I didn't exist, and left me in this room and left me to starve and to watch TV all day long. That's what I did. I would talk to random people through the gates of the window, but that's it. No one cared. No one listened. I've even found a way to climb through the window, but I grew too big to start doing that every day, you know. I escape the room sometimes and hide in the closet, thinking that someone would notice, but sometimes I would be in the closet for maybe 2, 3 days before getting tired myself of being in the closet and having to go back in the room where it would happen all over again. And I remember one time I did finally go out, and when I went outside, my neighbors, it was Jose, Angel, and David, and then my older brother, Raymond. So we were all cruising the neighborhood looking for things to do and play and stuff, and we come across a nice area of the neighborhood which was predominantly Jewish, and they had green grass and lawns, and you know, it was well kept. It was a really nice area, and this one house had bikes in the yard and the front yard, and Mark decided to no, Jose, Mark, and David. Jose, Mark, and David. So Mark was the one who decided, because there were two bikes. So Mark had one and Jose had the other. And they stole them, but they had pedals on the side of them, and they wanted us to get on the pedals, and I refused because I was scared. And he told me to shut up, you faggot, get up on the bike. And my brother Raymond just looked at him and did nothing, and he punched me because I didn't want to go there, and my eye swelled up like a balloon, and it was black and white, and it was huge. It was like this. And I showed my mother, and she did absolutely nothing. She didn't go talk to the parent, because guess what? The parent already knew what you were doing to me and what I've been through, and it couldn't compare. Like her child's misbehavior or hitting me was not justifiable enough for the torture that she had put me through as a mother. Makes a lot of sense, right? So I had a black eye for nothing, and there's there's so many things and so many signs of the person she was and what she was doing to me, but no one actually did anything. And now that she's dead, she literally gotten away with murder. She is a deadly woman. Um, there was a fight. I was like maybe 15. My mother and stepfather were fighting, and they fought all the time because he was a drug addict and she was having her own issues with drugs, and they fought all the time and bumped heads. And they were fighting, and I stepped in the fight, and I was beat up by my stepfather. And to protect myself and to protect my mother, I picked up this bottle of Colt 45 because there were two empty bottles of Colt 45 on the table. And I remember picking up one of them and throwing it. I didn't mean to hit nobody. I didn't hit nobody. It hit the wall. I was really surprised that it hit the wall. But it hit the wall and it shattered and it cut my mother's face. That is what I was told, because my mother later had me arrested. She's fighting with her husband from her husband hitting her and abusing her, and she had me arrested, a 15-year-old boy. So I was arrested. Got arrested, and what I come to find out is that she needed 82 stitches in her face because the glass had shattered and it had cut her face, and she needed to have reconstructive surgery. I thought that was strange because how does a single glass that is being shattered cause so much damage to your face? The bottle did not hit you, it hit the wall. The police investigated and proved it even further. So it hit the wall and shattered. What I later find out is that my mother actually picked up one of the shards of glass and sliced her face open. So no one would go through the effect, or she didn't want to tell the truth of what was actually happening between her and her husband, and let them get an instinct or an inkling that she was on medication. So she placed the blame on me. She placed the blame on me because the last thing she needed was the police to know that she was high or that her husband was high. So she had me arrested, and I got arrested, and I spent 2 weeks in Rikers Island. That's right, I was 15 years old and put in Rikers Island for assault and battery. 15 years old. I was not being charged as an adult. It was a misdemeanor for my youth, So I'm not sure why they even sent me there, but they did, and I was there, and it was worse because it was now like animals, and like I was new meat, literally, and everybody wanted to touch me and grab me and hold me and rape me. I was really scared, and finally when I got to the judge and the judge realizes the mistake that was made, they released me, and the cases were dropped. It's not even on my record anymore. It's expunged. So I had a lawsuit there, but my mother was too focused on the fact that I came back home. She didn't want me home. And the home environment was still the same. Nothing really changed. the only communication I had with people, the only communication I had with people, because my mother didn't allow me to have friends or have friends over while my other brothers and sisters did, and she wouldn't allow me to use the phone. In fact, she used to take the phone to prevent me from using it. And I didn't have any communication, so I started writing want ads and then secretly meeting up with these men. And I was hoping that I would meet one of them and perhaps they would become my boyfriend, or I don't know what's going on. Been hoping that they would be one of my boyfriends, like Uncle Juan was, and I would write these personal ads and I would get attention and go on these dates, but all we would do is have sex and I would never see them again. And I think some of them, or most of them, knew that I was underage because I said I was 18 and I clearly wasn't. But the sexual encounters just kept happening. And I thought maybe this is how it is to be gay because, again, my stepfather had done it to me. My Uncle Juan had done it to me. And, you know, these people now doing it to me, the only ones that are accepting. And everywhere else I turned was people trying to attack me and kill me, and my mother is one of them. She starved me. I was searching the streets for food and begging neighbors for food and to do odd jobs so I can buy food. Thankfully, when I was old enough, to actually, and got my working papers, I was actually old enough to work, and I worked in Burger King, and I further went on to work in McDonald's where Uncle Juan was. And here's in Burger King, the minimum wage was $4.25, and when business was slow, we had to stop. We had to clock out because the company couldn't afford to pay us when it was slow. And on this one particular night, it was me, a cashier, and the manager. Sean was his name, and Sean, he was just learning how to manage. He didn't really manage well, and he usually just stood there. And this night, he was doing the same thing, and it was slow, and we were all just standing there. So we and the cashier had to clock out, and an hour or two after we clocked out, it was our shifts weren't over, so we had to still be there, in case it got busy, and it did get busy, and that's another thing I didn't like, the fact that okay, if I have to clock out, then there's no reason for me to actually be here, but we did. We had to wait because it was within our shift. So I was there and she was there and we were waiting and it got busy. And we were on the turnpike in Five Towns, which is literally next door to JFK Airport. And there were a lot of traffic and tourists and people driving, through. And along the way, there were several mechanical shops and flea markets and clothing stores and a movie theater. It was a very busy highway. And this bus full of travelers that was going to JFK, they were a group of travelers, like they have those group plan type things where a bunch of people go and they travel to the same tour group. So yeah, it was this tour group of people, and the group of people came in, and it was like maybe 40 of them, and the cashier was taking the orders, and I was making the orders, and frying the fries, and making the chicken, and doing all these things by myself, while the manager just stood there. So the cashier, it wasn't such a problem for her to get through it because she was literally just taking the orders and doing the drinks, whereas I was making the food and doing it all by myself. We were just preparing to close and everything was cleaned, so I had to restock everything all over again and cook it from scratch. And it was taking time. And my manager was telling me to hurry up. And I was like, Sean, I can't do this by myself. I'm not a robot. He looked at me very evil like and, demanded I hurry up. And I said, help me if you want me to hurry. And he said something really derogatory underneath his breath, but I do remember the word faggot. So he said that under his breath and walked away. I was left alone, so it was a cashier, but we were able to get through it and people were okay. Then, as we had to clean up their mess, and after that mess and stuff, and clean up the mess in the kitchen that I made, it was time to close. And the store had already closed, but we were cleaning up, so it was now time for us to go home. And we had to wait for the manager to lock up so we can leave. He tells me to take out the garbage, and I already taken out the garbage. There was only one bag left, and it really wasn't necessary because it still could be used, and filled with more garbage. And he told me to take it out, so I did. And when I got outside through the back door, the back entrance, there was a hotel on the left side, and that's where the tour group was staying at. Was at the hotel, and then on the right side of it was a Party City type store or a gas station. I think it was a gas station, but we were in the middle, and Burger King was in the middle. So when you go out through the back entrance, there's a long parking lot, and at the end of the long parking lot, in this brush of trees and darkness, is a dumpster. And an oil dumpster, and you would throw the trash out there. So when I opened the door out of the restaurant, and because you had to put something in the door to keep it open, so I put a broom there, and when I got my bag, the garbage bag, to go down to the garbage bin and throw it away, I noticed 6 group of people. Why were they here? It was like 2:30 in the morning, and they were all standing there smoking weed and cigarettes, and I thought it was strange, but I didn't. And they were all mumbling things, but I was scared, and I didn't want it, to be out there. So I ran to the trash, and I dumped it, and I came back, and I closed the door. Now, as we're waiting for the manager to finish up and close up, I noticed those same 6 people. And when I noticed the same 6 people, that's when I realized something was wrong. And I, this time, go outside the back entrance. Because once I saw them in the front, I was no way going through the front. And I went outside the back. And that was an even bigger mistake because, as I said, it was pretty dark. And there were a lot of trees and brushes. And when I went back there, they jumped me. And all 6 of them were calling me faggot and gay and harassing me and kicking me in my face. And I was bloody and bruised, and I was being attacked viciously. And eventually it stopped because I was screaming, and they all ran away. But as they ran away, I noticed one face that was very familiar, and it was my manager's face. And he was saying, "Good job, fellas, good job. That'll teach that faggot." And I couldn't believe it. I eventually I got up and got collected, and I went next door to the hotel, and I was bloody and bruised, and they called the police. Now, because the 5 Towns area is in Nassau County, where I live and where those people lived was in Queens and Far Rockaway. So it was not within the police's jurisdiction to involve in this crime. So all the police did was drive me to the border of Queens or Nassau County. And I was bleeding and bruised, and He didn't offer any medical assistance or anything like that, or even offer to take me to the hospital. He just left me at the border after these people jumped me. And I was horrified. But yet, it was 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, going on 4 now, so he leaves me at the border. I end up walking for 14 blocks, and I get on the train, and I go home, and I get in a tub, and I wash up, and the next day I tell my mother what happened, and there's nothing there. She didn't care to even listen or want to pursue or press charges. I, myself, was the one who went into the police station to press charges. But because I had taken a shower, it had ruined the forensic evidence, and the pictures were not as good as they wanted, and he was arrested for a lesser crime, and he paid his bail and was released, and he got away with it. But what I find most disturbing is something happened to your son that was really traumatic, and you don't care or seem to get involved or want to do anything about it. But had it been my other brothers or my sister, because my sister got all the attention because she was the only girl, had it been that, you would have went through the roof to find a way. Now again, when I tell you that my mother was addicted yeah. again, when I tell you my mother was addicted to prescription drugs, I did not know this until years later. But there were the signs. There were signs of her drug use and her prescription overdosing and her behavior patterns and things of that nature. Because again, it's all addressed to me and how she treated me. This is my mother. My mother. My mother hated me. She despised me. She didn't love me at all. And it's sad and unfortunate that this is how it is. She shaped me and molded me to essentially live a life of loneliness and isolation, because it has always been my safe space. A room with a TV. That's always been my safe space. There's nobody to attack me here. There's nobody to bully me here. There's nobody to beat me here. There's nobody to starve me here. It's been my safe space, and still is to this day. My mother was an evil woman. Evil. Evil. But there was a time when my mother did let me outside the house, and I did go outside the house to play, and the neighbors, all of them, it was Peter, David, and Mark. Peter, David, and Mark were all my neighbors, and they attacked me and jumped me. But this time it was different. Because, after getting jumped so often, it became routine, and this is, I guess, how it is outside, So I did try to avoid going outside because it was no different from the inside. And they attacked me and they jumped me. But this time it was different. They took out they unzipped their pants, and one of them was peeing on me, and then another one held my head while Peter stuck his dick inside my mouth. And he was this Irish guy, and he had red hair, and teenager, not a guy, I should say. And Mark was a Puerto Rican with long black hair. And Jose had short brown hair and Puerto Rican as well. And they held me down, and forced me to suck his dick, and if I didn't, David kept hitting me and hitting me while Jose was holding my head. So I was being forced to suck his dick, and I did. And he liked it. He liked it so much, he came. And he came all over my face and spit on me as he left. But it wasn't over. They came back. While I lie there on the floor, trying to wipe away the mess, and they peed on me. In front of my door, where I lived, where my mother was inside. I was locked outside the house, and this happened on our front door. On our front door. My mother didn't care. My mother didn't want me. I was that bastard child. Anything she could do or have done to me to get rid of me, she was in favor of. She was an evil woman, a despicable woman, a woman who should have never given birth to me.